This is the multi-channel e-commerce presentation presented by Mailware. If you have questions during the presentation, you should have a control panel up, or if you don't see the actual control panel, there's an orange button usually to the right of your screen. If you click that, that'll give you an option to type in questions. We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type them as we're progressing through. So if you have any problems, there's a little option to raise your hand, and our organizer will help you with any technical difficulties you may be having. As you can see from our map here, there's several things we're going to cover. I'll try to move through this quickly. We should be no longer than half an hour. Okay. So to begin, if any of you have been in mail order for a while, it started with catalogs, mailing in a form, waiting 4 to 6 weeks, and getting your item back. That's the good old, or if you prefer the bad old days of mail order. And it has, for all intents and purposes, improved. We're going to go over the next step, which is web stores, and that's where things really started to heat up. When we started this business in 1995, catalogs were the thing. Within a few years, web stores became important, but it was typically a single web store, and not everybody knew why they needed it. The old IBM commercial comes to mind of the two executives, one sitting at a desk reading a white paper and the other one standing up, and the one reading says, "We need a website." And the other fellow asks, "Okay, why?" And he returns the paper, he looks at it for a moment, and he says, "It doesn't say." That was the attitude about web stores back when they first came out. People continued to send out catalogs, everything was sent the old way, but slowly but surely web stores started creeping up. Now there's probably 300 plus web stores that are in regular use, and that's just part of the puzzle. One of the reasons, obviously, for having a web store is to reach more of your customers, and it's far superior to a catalog alone, although catalogs are certainly part of the play. And it's less expensive to sell on the web. However, one of the problems that most people had was getting people to go to their web store. Back again in the day, there was not a good way to segment and target your market, trying to find people who were interested in your product. Ads and Google AdWords, probably one of the most powerful tools today, wasn't developed or wasn't mature. There weren't good ways to bring people to your site. And so your web store was kind of another tool, but not your main selling point. Until the early part of 2000s, most of our customers had anywhere between 5 and 15% of their orders coming in through the web. Today, the vast majority of them come in through the web, and in some cases, they don't take phone orders or catalog orders at all. Okay, now we get to some of the more interesting things. In addition to having a web store, Magento, Amiva, Xcart, there's again 300 or so, there's other places that you want to be. We'll explain why shortly. But they are marketplaces, auction sites, and feeds. Some examples: eBay's a clear auction site we all know about. Amazon is a huge marketplace. Again, another one where most of our customers get the vast majority of their business on the web. Buy.com is another, and I'm sure some of you have sites on things like Magento and Xcart, etc. The main reason for a multi-channel situation for the bulk of us that sell on the web is reaching more customers. You can't reach customers alone just by putting out a catalog anymore. It's not sufficient to have a site and have that site alone draw people. If you remember a moment ago, we talked about targeting and segmenting customers and drawing them to your site. However, exposure on things like Amazon and eBay is huge. They've already reached out and touched millions upon millions of customers that you can also touch with your product. So starting with an auction site. Everybody's familiar with eBay. Some of you may be familiar with UBid. One of the advantages to an auction site is it's an easy entry. We'll talk about Amazon and other marketplaces soon, but if you've tried to sell on those, you probably are aware that they take anywhere from 12 to 15% of your sales price, which can be a chunk of change. Whereas eBay has a lower cost of entry, takes a lower price on it, and you still get exposure. Most common exposure there is product searches. People are looking for a specific type of product, and they'll find you. They're less likely to be looking for your store. But if you sell electronics, for instance, and they type the model number of a phone, then a large majority of customers are going to go to eBay looking for that. If you're not familiar with how auctions work, or if you haven't done an auction before, the vast majority of people right now either manually put in individual auctions or use tools like Blackthorn or Turbo Lister. And also the vast majority of the customers that we talk to use this for selling off overstock. And they don't use it as their main store site, although there are exceptions. And here's some of the pros and cons. Again, it's easier to get into. When we say site-specific features, with an auction, it's very product-oriented. You can have the same product out there over and over again, so it's almost like a store that's running. However, there are cons. There are fees to list in some cases, and there's certainly fees when you sell the product. And integration with auction sites is more complex than with web stores and with marketplaces. Now, another source to use, and probably less commonly known, are what are called feeds. And you've seen some of these probably when you've searched for a product and weren't even aware you were looking at a feed. Again, the electronics example, if you were to type a phone and try to find that particular phone and look for the lowest price, you could find it in one of two ways. You might find it on a site, again, like an auction site like eBay or Amazon, or you might find it in a feed. A feed is a link back to your web store or to your marketplace, and the advantage there is that you show up in price comparisons, you show up in more places, and the more feeds that you're connected to, the more likely you are to show up by that product search. If you're selling one product, it's useful. If you're selling thousands, it's necessary. When your customers come in and look in on a feed and compare you to several other people, click on the link there. It'll take them to your store where, of course, they can actually purchase your product. So we've now covered auctions and feeds as two of the places that you want to find yourself when we're talking about multi-channels. And then again, for pros and cons on the feeds, you get a tremendous amount of exposure and a lot of customers that you're talking to. It's also one of the least expensive ways to get the word out. Cons are you're going to be lumped in with everybody else, and you're going to have a lot of clutter out there. So you're just one of the little voices with a lot of noise. And then marketplaces. Marketplaces are huge, and we can thank Amazon for a lot of that. This would be a central location where you might sell your products. If you've ever been to Amazon, you'll notice they sell their own products, but they also sell products from a number of different customers, for them customers, for the rest of the world sellers. Originally, Amazon was selective about who they invited. Now it's very easy to become an Amazon marketplace seller. However, there are caveats which we'll cover. An online marketplace is therefore like a mall. It's a central location where many, many sellers sell products through a single portal. It's not difficult to list your products on there. You usually need a unique UPC code. And then in the case of Amazon, they'll assign an ASIN for each code. You have very little control over what displays in the case of an existing product, which is not a bad thing. Or you can create products if you have unique ones or they don't exist yet using the UPC and getting an ASIN created. And then they'll show up as listings. So pros and cons, tremendous exposure, especially with Amazon. Again, many of our customers get the bulk of their sales now, or at least a good percentage through Amazon. And it's relatively cost effective. Again, be aware that you're looking at 12 to 15% of your sales price being taken by Amazon. But with the exposure, if your margins allow, that's still a tremendous resource. You cannot live on marketplaces alone, however. You do need a web store and our phone orders, catalogs, etc. And it is difficult to differentiate yourself in marketplaces. However, there are tools for those. One of our partners is ChannelMax, which does pricing and allows you to compete with your competitors based on their lowest price, including shipping, so that you can push yourself to the top of those lists. So that's one way to get out of the clutter there and put yourself to the top. However, one of the big cons to be very careful of is losing Amazon seller status, because once you're out, you're usually out permanently with Amazon. It's very difficult to get back in. The things that cause this would be not shipping on time or not uploading that you shipped on time, so your customers complain or you're not meeting the Amazon requirements. Not having product that you say you have because you find yourself in a back order status and you're unable to fulfill it. So any kind of customer issues there can drop you out of Amazon. It's not a place that you want to go. And then finally, back to where we started right after catalogs, and that is web carts. And these can be very simple or very complex depending on the type of product you have and how you sell it. If you're selling a product with a lot of variations, size, color, etc., then there is a shorter list of carts that you're able to work with. If not, then usually a cart's pretty easy to set up, and they vary in range from free to tens of thousands of dollars. We usually recommend ones that are either free or charge you for support as you grow your store. However, if you have technical support on staff, things like eCommerce, which is open source, allows you to create your own kind of cart. Now, when you're talking in the mix of multi-channel, we have a combination of, again, your web cart or your web carts, your marketplace, any auctions that you want to be on, and feeds. So you want to consider the whole prospect when you're starting to put together your multi-channel plan. In the case of web carts, it's easier for the consumer to go to your web store than they use to call you or order out of the catalog typically, and it's easier for you. You have less phone calls to deal with. You can send updates through your web cart to customers letting them know things have shipped, so they're less likely to call you checking on it. However, there are cons, and the most typical con is setting this up. A lot of us are not technically savvy. Finding people out there who set up web carts that are reliable can be difficult. There's many, many people who advertise themselves as being proficient at this, but finding somebody reliable and consistent can be a problem. And then if it's not well designed, the customers aren't real fond of having to give their name and address, and then their shipping name and address, their credit card number, and date of birth, social security number, and whatever else you may ask for in checkout. So there are ways to streamline that depending on the cart that you're using. And finally, integration, and that means integrating your phone and catalog orders, your marketplace, your auctions, etc., all into one place so that you're bringing your orders down and managing your inventory without micromanaging, which is more of what we're talking about now. When you're managing multiple channels, although the exposure is great, the biggest issue is keeping track of your inventory counts. You don't want to have 10 items listed in 5 different places and sell 10 on one of them and not be able to update the other 4. So keeping track of your inventory and uploading it to the sites is one of the key elements to succeeding in a multi-channel environment. And it ties back to what we mentioned earlier with things like Amazon, where if you do not fulfill your orders, you do not keep your customers happy, they'll drop you. So inventory would be probably the #1 thing that you'd be concerned about. It is time-consuming as you're typically working on the back ends of most of these services on their web interface to fulfill orders, print invoices, that sort of thing. And you're going to find yourself increasing your number of orders probably dramatically. If you go back to the beginning of our presentation where people had just catalogs, if they had stayed in the catalog state while other people were opening web stores, they may not be here today. We're finding the same situation with multi-channel management. If you're just dependent on your phone orders and or your web store, you're falling behind. So you do need to be on Amazon, eBay, whatever is appropriate for your product in order to compete. Again, Amazon status, reputation within the community if you're not fulfilling on time, becoming overwhelmed. These are all the issues that we just talked about with multi-channel management that are the scary parts of it. However, the benefits are probably well overwhelm this for everyone out there. You typically will get a good reputation. You're selling in a lot of different places. You're available. People can find you. We have very little patience when we search on the web. We'll type our product number, hope that the Google will show us exactly where it is, click on the lowest price and buy. You want to be on the top of that list. You also want to be talking directly to your audience. So SEO and keywords are really important. Many of us have hired people to do that for us. Really what you should be doing is putting your products out there with feeds and with marketplaces, etc., so that they SEO for you. Somebody types your product number, they should see you coming to the top of the list because you're the lowest price or the best reputation. So we've talked about using e-commerce and branching that out into multi-channels. We discussed what the different channels are. Again, they're auction sites, feeds, and marketplaces as well as your own web cart. We It can become overwhelming. There are solutions to that. There's ways to manage that. However, it's worthwhile because when you're selling on multiple channels, there's a much broader audience than you're used to reaching if you're currently just doing catalog and/or your own web store. And our little map of everything that is multi-channel to give you an idea of what we just discussed. Now, we'd like to open up for any questions that anyone has. If you like, you can just type them into the little box that we showed you before, and I'll be glad to answer them. While you're thinking of any questions, we will be posting this presentation up to our website, so we'll send you a link so you can download it and use it if you need it. There's also, we can help you if you have any questions. Feel free to call us about how to set up your web stores or set up your marketplaces, etc. If you're a current Mailware customer, we have some solutions for you using Mailware to manage the various sites, auctions, and marketplaces, etc. If not, of course, we'd be glad to talk to you about our product if you're interested.